The cold wind howled through the torn banners of the north, sweeping across the icy plains like a warning. Beyond the wall, the dead had already begun to march. But this story doesn't start with Jon Snow or Daenerys Targaryen. No, it begins in the heart of King's Landing, where power, pride, and politics still ruled stronger than any threat from the north. Queen Cersei Lannister sat on the Iron Throne, her golden hair pinned high, her face calm but sharp like a blade. News of the dead marching south had reached her, but she didn't care. In her mind, it was just another tale, another trick from the north to take her throne. But things changed when the raven came not from the north, but from the Vale Lord Royce himself had seen the undead with his own eyes. The message was clear. The wall has fallen. The Night King comes. Still, Cersei didn't panic. She summoned her son, King Joffrey, who in this twist of fate had survived the poison at his wedding. Now older, more cruel, and even more paranoid than before, Joffrey was the kind of ruler people feared, but didn't respect. He laughed when he read the raven's words. "Let the dead come," he said. "We'll burn them like we burn traitors." But one man in the room didn't laugh. Tywin Lannister. Brought back from the grave through old Valyrian dark magic by Qyburn, Tywin was not truly dead in this world. He returned with quiet fury in his eyes, more calculating than ever. He had one rule: Lannisters survive. Always. Cersei was suspicious of this new Tywin. He wasn't the same. But she knew that without his mind, they were doomed. The small council was gathered. Qyburn explained what they were dealing with: an army that never sleeps, never tires, and grows stronger with every death. "This enemy isn't human," he said, "and it cannot be bribed." King Joffrey, full of pride, still refused to believe it. "We'll send the gold cloaks north," he ordered, slamming his fist on the throne. "They'll see what real men can do." Tywin stepped forward. "Foolish. The gold cloaks are city guards, not soldiers. This is not a war we can win with arrogance." Then he turned to Cersei. "You must gather every bannerman, every soldier, and even every enemy if needed. Or else there won't be a throne left to sit on." Reluctantly, Cersei sent ravens. One to Dorne, one to the Iron Islands, and even one to Daenerys Targaryen, offering a ceasefire. The Lannisters were ready to fight, but they would do it their way, with strategy, cruelty, and control. Soon, news came that Winterfell had fallen. The White Walkers were marching fast, and the north was being swallowed by ice and death. Jon Snow had vanished, assumed dead in battle. Daenerys was retreating south with her dragons, but one had already fallen and turned. King's Landing panicked. Refugees poured through the gates. The people screamed of walking corpses. Cersei watched from her balcony as the city slowly collapsed into fear. But she held her head high. "Let them be scared," she whispered. "Fear keeps people in line." Tywin began planning the defense of the south like a game of Civis. He moved armies like pieces on a board. He ordered wildfire to be stockpiled. The gold cloaks were retrained. Even Joffrey was forced to sit and listen as his grandfather gave him lessons in real war. And then ... the first White Walker was spotted near Harrenhal. Joffrey called for a public hanging of anyone who spoke of defeat. He wanted to be seen as strong. But inside, even he began to shake. Meanwhile, Cersei visited the dungeons. There, in the dark, she stood in front of an old enemy, Jaime Lannister, now her prisoner for betraying her in the past. She didn't speak. She just looked at him for a long time before saying, "Even monsters have their uses." Something terrible was coming. And for the first time, the Lannisters might have to bleed together, or die alone. Night fell over King's Landing, but sleep had abandoned the city. Whispers of Harrenhal's fall had turned into screams. People claimed to see blue eyes in the dark. Children cried about icy hands pulling them in their dreams, and the sept bells rang too often, announcing death after death from panic, riots, or cold. In the Red Keep, Queen Cersei held her wine tightly. Her eyes flicked toward the map table, where Tywin had pushed tiny lion sigils southward, retreating faster than even she expected. "They're not just killing," he said. "They're recruiting. Every soldier they defeat joins them. And with each day, they become an army we cannot match." Joffrey slammed his goblet to the floor. "I am the king. We will not run like cowards." Tywin didn't flinch. A dead king commands no one? For once, Cersei didn't protect Joffrey. She knew now this war would eat the arrogant first. Tywin had begun forming a desperate plan. He called it the fire trap. Cersei had secretly ordered wildfire from the old stores beneath the city. There was enough hidden there to blow King's Landing sky high if they needed to. Tywin's idea was worse. He wanted to draw the White Walkers into the city, then burn the capital itself. Everyone in it. A final sacrifice. "The city burns either way," he said coldly. "Better by our hands than theirs." Cersei didn't say no. But something unexpected happened. A raven arrived, not from Daenerys, not from the north, but from Euron Greyjoy. His fleet had seen the army of the dead, walking on the ocean itself. He described the waves freezing as they marched. "They walk on water now," the note said. There is no escape. Cersei knew Euron was mad, but not a liar. Tywin tightened his jaw. The dead were closing in from all sides. Then came the sound of chains. Heavy, echoing chains pulled through the stone courtyards of the Red Keep. Cersei followed the sound until she reached the old catacombs. There she found Qyburn smiling. "A gift, my queen," he said. Behind him, in a cage of Valyrian steel, stood a beast even Cersei had not expected. A White Walker, captured alive. Its blue eyes burned. Its breath turned the air to frost. But it did not move. It was chained with spells and fire-forged iron. "I believe I can learn to control them," Qyburn whispered. "Perhaps even turn them." Cersei's mind raced. Could they do it? Could they turn the very army of death into a weapon for the throne? She smiled. "We don't need to fight the dead," she said slowly. "We need to own them." Tywin, watching from the shadows, said nothing. But inside, he was calculating something darker. If Qyburn could control the dead, who really needed the living anymore? The next day, Cersei made a shocking announcement. King's Landing will not surrender. We will not kneel. We will not flee. We will fight ... We will win. Joffrey paraded through the streets, dressed in black armor, forged from obsidian and gold. He held up the head of a captured wight, tossing it to the crowds. "The dead bleed like anyone else," he lied. The city roared. Not in hope, but in madness. Meanwhile, Tywin met in secret with the last person anyone expected, Sir Jaime Lannister. His face was older, marked by scars and betrayal, but his eyes were clearer than ever. "You're the only Lannister left with a sense of honor," Tywin said coldly. Jaime looked up. "That's why you locked me up?" "No," Tywin said. "That's why I need you." He handed Jaime a dagger made of dragonglass and whispered a single sentence. "If Qyburn loses control, kill them all, even family." And so the pieces moved. A mad king, a ruthless queen, a cold general, and a dead army marching ever closer. The Game of Thrones had never been colder. The night they came, the sky itself seemed to scream. A terrible cold wind howled down from the north, sweeping over the riverlands and carrying with it the sound of bones rattling and steel breaking. Fires burned in the far distance, but they brought no warmth, only shadows. King's Landing stood trembling beneath a blood-red moon. From the top of the Red Keep, Cersei watched the white fog roll in. "This is it," she whispered. "Let the dead come." The city walls had been turned into fortresses of dragonglass. Qyburn's invention, called the Sunfire cannons, lined the battlements, designed to launch barrels of wildfire mixed with obsidian shards. But no one knew if they would work. Joffrey stood before a crowd of trembling soldiers in the courtyard, wearing black and gold armor, a sword too big for him hanging from his hip. His voice was shaking, but his pride wouldn't let him stop. "You fight for the crown. You fight for your king. You fight or die like cowards." Behind him, men whispered, "He's sending us to die. A boy leading men into death. Where's the real commander?" And in the shadows, Tywin listened to every word. Far beyond the gates, the dead had begun to appear. Not in massive waves, not yet, but in small, terrifying groups. Children with twisted necks, soldiers with spears still through their chests, even horses with no skin, their eyes glowing blue. The first battle began at the outer gate near Flea Bottom. The city watch barely held them off. Flaming arrows rained from the walls, and obsidian blades cracked through bone, but every death became their new enemy. For every white burned, 2 more rose. In the chaos, Cersei did something no one expected. She rode out. On horseback, dressed in black armor shaped like a lion's head, she led a charge of knights into the undead. She swung her sword like fury itself, screaming not in fear but rage. Her eyes burned with something wild, something hateful. "Burn them! Burn them all!" The people cheered. For a moment they believed, but that belief shattered when the sky cracked open. From the clouds came a monstrous sound like a horn from hell, and through the mist they saw it. Viserion, the undead dragon, his wings torn, fire now blue and cold as ice. He screamed over the city and breathed death onto the gates of King's Landing. Walls of fire and ice crashed down together, turning soldiers to ash and stone to dust. Joffrey fled. He ran into the Red Keep, locked himself in the throne room, and screamed at the guards, "Protect me. I'm your king." But most guards had already deserted. In the dungeons, Qyburn stood beside his chained White Walker, trying to chant old spells to control it. But the thing had stopped obeying. Its eyes glowed brighter. It had begun to whisper ancient, cursed words, and then it broke its chains. Elsewhere, Jaime Lannister was freed. Tywin had given the order hours earlier, trusting only his disgraced son now. "Find the boy king," Tywin had said. "If he loses control, you know what must be done." Jaime climbed the burning stairs of the Red Keep, sword in hand. He passed bodies, both dead and undead, crawling, screaming, reaching for warmth they would never feel again. In the throne room, he found Joffrey hiding behind the Iron Throne, crying, sword dropped on the floor. "They're here," Joffrey shrieked. "Do something! I'm the king!" Jaime stepped forward. Not anymore. At that moment, Viserion landed outside the Red Keep with a deafening crash, his undead eyes fixed on the tower. The walls shook. Outside, Cersei stood bleeding, her armor broken, her face cut, but she smiled through it all. "Let it all burn," she said. "Let the world remember who fought till the end." And in the darkest hour, Qyburn's experiment walked free. Not just a White Walker anymore, but something twisted, part magic, part human, part death. It spoke with his voice. "I am the new King of Ashes." And King's Landing had never been closer to becoming exactly that. Smoke covered the sky like a funeral shroud. The once great towers of King's Landing were either crumbling or frozen in ice. Fire and frost danced together in the streets, one burning everything it touched, the other freezing people in mid-scream. At the center of this hell stood Qyburn's monster. No longer a man, no longer a White Walker, but something worse, something intelligent. It called itself the Frostfire King. It still had Qyburn's voice, but layered with whispers of 1,000 dead. It walked slowly, dragging a staff made from bones and Valyrian steel. Every step it took turned the ground beneath the frost. And behind it, the dead followed, not just silent now, but chanting. Tywin Lannister stood atop the inner wall, staring at the thing below. He didn't flinch, didn't speak. Only his eyes narrowed. Beside him, a general asked, "What is it?" Tywin replied, "The price of playing with death." Deep in the Red Keep, Jaime faced Joffrey, who had completely lost his mind. "You can't do this." Joffrey screamed, clutching at his uncle's armor. "You're nothing. You're a cripple." "I'm your king." Jaime said nothing. His golden hand gripped the dragonglass blade tighter. "I'm the king," Joffrey whimpered again, before Jaime knocked him unconscious with a single punch. Outside, Cersei stood among her burning army, blood pouring down her face, but her eyes fixed on Viserion. The undead dragon was tearing through the city, ice fire blasting through buildings like paper. And then she saw something Daenerys, riding Rhaegal, the last living dragon, diving through the smoke. For a moment, the two queens locked eyes through the ash. No words. No mercy. Just war. Rhaegal crashed into Viserion mid-air, and the sky became a battlefield. Dragon fire met dragon ice, lighting up the heavens in blue and green. Below, people screamed, but none looked away. The gods themselves seemed to watch. In the chaos, Tywin finally gave his order. "Prepare the fire trap." 1,000 barrels of wildfire, hidden beneath the streets, were ready to explode. But he needed a signal. A final moment? And for that, he looked to Jaime. Jaime carried Joffrey's limp body toward the lower tunnels, where a secret chamber held the switch. Behind him, soldiers fell, whites climbed the walls, and the Frostfire King moved closer to the throne room. Meanwhile, Cersei found herself cornered near the Sept of Baelor, surrounded by whites. Her guards had died screaming. Her sword was broken. For the first time, she looked around and saw no way out. And she heard hooves, a horse, a shadow riding through the flames. It was Sandor Clegane the Hound, scarred, tired, but alive. He cut through the dead like a man possessed. "Thought you were the Queen of Ash," he grunted as he pulled her onto the horse. "Let's make sure you're not queen of nothing." Back inside the keep, the Frostfire King reached the Iron Throne. It touched the twisted swords, and they froze. The throne itself began to crack, then shatter. A symbol of power, broken by death. But Jaime had reached the chamber. He laid Joffrey on the floor. The boy stirred, blinking. "What are you doing?" Jaime looked at the lever. "Ending your reign." Above them, the bell rang once more. A signal. Tywin turned to the archers. "Light it." One flaming arrow soared into the sky. It flew past towers, past dead and living alike, until it hit the first wildfire barrel. The ground shook. One by one, the barrels exploded. The streets turned green with flame. Whites screamed as they burned. Whole blocks vanished in firestorms. The Red Keep began to collapse. Rhaegal, bleeding, roared as he flew away. Viserion, engulfed in green fire, fell from the sky and crashed into the sea. Cersei, watching from a distance with the Hound, wept, not for the city, not for the people, but for the throne. She whispered, "It's over." But from the ruins, as the fire died down, the Frostfire King still stood, burning, melting, but smiling. He pointed north. Winter, he said in a voice not his own, was just the beginning. The city was no longer King's Landing. It had no king, no throne, no hope. Where once stood marble towers, now rose blackened ruins. Wildfire still burned in patches, casting a sickly green glow on twisted corpses and half-frozen streets. Smoke rolled over the city like a blanket of despair. The only sounds were the soft crackle of fire and the distant wailing of those who survived. But amidst the ruins, one figure still moved with purpose: Tywin Lannister. Covered in ash, armor dented, sword bloodied, yet his mind sharp. He had survived the fire trap by hiding in the tunnels beneath the Red Keep, his escape planned long before the battle began. He wasn't surprised the Frostfire King had survived. "I knew Qyburn's creations would betray us," he muttered, stepping over a burning corpse. He found Sir Jaime, half buried under rubble, breathing shallowly. Joffrey's body lay nearby, finally silent. "You pulled the lever," Tywin said. Jaime opened his eyes, bruised and bleeding. He wasn't a king. He was a child playing God. Tywin knelt. "Then maybe we deserve the god's wrath." Far above them, Daenerys circled on Rhaegal, searching for survivors. She had seen the Frostfire King survive the wildfire. Her dragon was wounded cut by ice, bleeding thick black smoke. They couldn't fight him again. Not yet. She spotted Cersei below riding with the hound, barely alive. Rage boiled inside her. She could end it, right now. One blast of dragonfire. One scream of justice. But her heart hesitated. Cersei wasn't holding a sword. She wasn't barking orders. She looked ... defeated. Her golden hair burned away, her dress torn, eyes red and empty. Daenerys turned her dragon. "This isn't mercy," she whispered. "It's pity." In the silence, a new sound filled the air, the sound of drums. War drums. From the North Road came the last unexpected force, the Knights of the Vale, led by Sansa Stark. They had come late, slowed by ice and death. Their banners flew high, the direwolf and the falcon. Beside her rode Brienne of Tarth, gray cloak whipping in the wind, her sword already wet with undead blood. As Sansa entered the ruined city, her face twisted in horror. This was supposed to be the capital of the Seven Kingdoms. "It was," Brienne replied. "Now it's a tomb." They found Tywin and Jaime near the broken gates. Sansa dismounted, her eyes locking with Tywin's. "This is what your legacy looks like." Tywin looked at the fire, then at her. "No, this is what happens when fire and ice forget their place." Just then, the wind shifted. The temperature dropped again. Frost returned to the streets. And from the ash, the Frostfire King emerged once more, this time with new armor, made from the melted swords of the Iron Throne. His crown was a jagged piece of ice and fire, fused by death. He raised his hand. The dead rose again. This time, faster, stronger, smarter. Jaime grabbed his sword, limping forward. Brienne joined him, shoulder to shoulder. Tywin drew his blade as well. Sansa stepped back, but her face did not show fear. Only fury. From behind the walls came Daenerys, landing hard with Rhaegal. She dismounted, limping toward the group. "We end this," she said. Cersei, watching from a tower, whispered, "I should have burned them all when I had the chance." The Frostfire King raised his voice for the first time in a language none understood. But every living soul felt it deep in their bones, like a curse. He wasn't trying to win a war. He was trying to replace life itself. And now, the last of the living stood shoulder to shoulder, not as enemies, but as survivors of a dying world. Their only chance was unity. Their only weapon, what little humanity they had left. And as the dead charged, as the frost returned, and the last dragon roared, the true final war began. The charge of the dead wasn't loud. It was silent, eerily so. No roars, no war cries. Just the soft crunch of frozen bodies on blackened stone, and the whisper of the Frostfire Kings while guiding them forward like puppets. The defenders, what few remained, stood in a broken line at the center of what used to be the Great Sept. No walls, no battlements. Just scorched ground, cracked statues, and the heavy breath of those ready to die standing. Sansa Stark had never held a sword in war before. But today, she carried one, her hand trembling slightly as she looked at the army of death crawling toward them. She turned to Daenerys, who was leaning against Rhaegal, blood on her face. "If we fall," Sansa said, "the North falls next." Daenerys nodded. "Then we don't fall." Brienne and Jaime stood side by side. Two knights with broken histories, broken hearts, but unbroken will. Jaime's dragonglass blade pulsed in the cold light, and Brienne's sword had already killed too many whites to count. Tywin Lannister stood behind them, not as a commander now, But as a man facing his last mistake, burn them all, he muttered. That should have been the plan from the beginning. But they couldn't burn what kept coming. The Frostfire King raised his staff again. This time, the whites moved faster. Not slow, zombie-like shambling, but running, leaping, snarling. Twisted versions of people they once knew. Some wore gold cloaks. Some wore northern armor. Some had lion pins, Lannister soldiers, northern bannermen. The dead didn't care who you once were. Rhaegal screamed and blasted the first wave with green dragon fire that Daenerys had infused with wildfire barrels, stronger but more dangerous. Whole lines of undead melted into ash, but it wasn't enough. Brienne charged forward. Jaime followed, and the rest. A final suicidal push. The air was thick with the stench of burning flesh and freezing blood. Jaime saw a child white jump at him. He hesitated just a second too long. Brienne cut it down before it reached him. "No mercy," she said. "Not anymore." Sansa moved through the chaos like a ghost, dragging injured fighters to safety. Tywin covered her, swinging his sword with brutal precision, every movement calculated like a man moving chess pieces. But then it happened. The Frostfire King pointed his staff directly at Rhaegal. A pulse of ice-blue energy shot out, hitting the dragon mid-flight. Rhaegal screamed and crashed into the ruins, wings shattered, pinned beneath rubble. Daenerys screamed too, rushing toward her dragon, but it was too late. The Frostfire King was walking toward her now, slow but unstoppable. "Breaker of chains," he said, voice filled with every death she had ever seen. "You will kneel before death." Daenerys raised her sword, but the air froze around her hand. Her breath turned to mist. Her knees buckled, the fire inside her fading. And then came a whistle. A horn, a northern war horn. The wall behind the ruins burst open. Horses galloped through. Arya Stark at the front, face covered in blood, 2 dragonglass daggers in hand. Behind her, what remained of the free folk, a few Night's Watch brothers, and even some Dothraki who had refused to die. They slammed into the dead like a hammer. Arya leapt straight at the Frostfire King, but he caught her mid-air with one hand. He threw her like a doll. She hit the wall hard, but stood up again, spitting blood. "Not today," she hissed. Tywin shouted across the battlefield. "Now!" Another group of survivors lit the second layer of wildfire traps, hidden in the city's heart. The explosion this time was massive, sending whites flying, tearing open the earth, creating a wall of fire between the living and the Frostfire King. But he walked through it, slowly, burning, not dying. And then Cersei appeared. She had returned to the Red Keep's tallest tower. Her armor was gone. Her crown was cracked. In her arms she held a black chest, something Qyburn had warned her never to open. Inside, the last secret weapon. A mirror of obsidian, stolen from Asshai. It didn't kill the dead. It showed them what they were. She held it up. The Frostfire King paused. For the first time, his face changed. The whispers inside him went silent. Cersei looked into his eyes and said, "You were mine. You came from us. Now die with us." Then she smashed the mirror on the stone. The sky split. The earth cracked. The Frostfire King screamed, not in rage, but in pain, in fear. All around them, the dead froze in place, not moving, not burning, not crumbling, just waiting. And in the silence, Tywin whispered to himself, "We've paused death, not ended it." And everyone knew the final blow had not yet been struck. But it was coming, and someone would have to deliver it. The battlefield had gone quiet, but not peaceful. The Frostfire King stood frozen mid-step, his body burning, cracking, yet still holding form. His army of the dead, once unstoppable, now stood motionless, eyes dim, locked in place like statues of rot and sorrow. The shattering of the obsidian mirror had halted something inside him, but not destroyed it. The air was heavy. No birds, no wind, just the stench of burned flesh and melting ice. The survivors, few and scattered, waited with weapons ready, unsure if it was truly over, or if death was only catching its breath. Cersei, high in the tower, collapsed beside the broken mirror, her chest rising weakly. Her hands bled, her lips trembled. She had used the last weapon, but it hadn't killed him. She stared at the ruin below. Why won't he die? She whispered, why won't anything die? Below, Daenerys knelt beside Rhaegal, the dragon's breathing shallow. His wings were torn, scales cracked, blood seeping like lava. She placed her hand on his chest, tears streaking down her ash-covered face. I brought fire to this world, she said, her voice hollow. And still, I couldn't stop the cold. Arya limped across the field, one dagger broken, the other still clenched tight. She moved toward the Frostfire King, eyes locked on his. She had killed many monsters, but never one that stood still and yet terrified the world. He's waiting, she said softly to Sansa, who now stood at her side, dirt and frost clinging to her cloak. For what? Arya's grip tightened. The last piece. Tywin stepped forward now, slow and deliberate. He stared at the Frostfire King, eyes narrowed. He's not finished because we didn't finish him, right? Jaime stood beside him, blood on his lips, sword still warm. What do you mean? Tywin turned, and his face had no emotion. Just the cold logic of a man who had played too many games. He was made from our sins. From betrayal, greed, dark magic, and death. Qyburn didn't create him from ice alone. He mixed in the blood of kings. Everyone went still. You mean, Jaime began. Tywin nodded. He carries Lannister blood. Daenerys stepped forward, shocked. Then how do we kill what's part of you? Tywin didn't blink. With the part of us that still has honor. Silence fell. Then Arya looked at Jaime. It has to be you. Jaime's jaw tightened. I already killed one king, and kill the last one, said Brienne, stepping beside him. Jaime turned toward the Frostfire King, who still stood, barely breathing, cracks glowing in his chest where the obsidian mirror had wounded his soul. Jaime took off his cloak. His golden hand clinked as he reached into his belt. He drew the dagger Bran had once nearly died from now reforged in dragonglass. He walked slowly, each step echoing through the dead city. As he approached, the Frostfire King's head tilted slightly. His eyes glowed brighter. You are my blood, the thing whispered in a voice full of pain and power. My brother. Jaime didn't stop. You are the blade, the voice said. You could join me. End death. Rule forever. Jaime raised the dagger. His face was calm. I don't want to rule. I just want peace. Then he drove the blade deep into the Frostfire King's chest right, where the cracks glowed the brightest. The creature screamed, a sound that shattered windows, cracked towers, and silenced the wind. Light poured from its chest, its mouth, its eyes. The fire and ice inside it collided in a final explosion of energy. And then, silence. The Frostfire King collapsed in ash. His army dropped with him, whites crumbling, walkers turning to ice dust. The dead were finally dead. The curse was broken. Jaime fell to his knees, breathing hard. Brienne rushed to his side, holding him before he collapsed. Sansa lowered her sword. Arya dropped to her knees. Cersei, watching from above, whispered, A Lannister paid the final debt. Then she closed her eyes and never opened them again. Days passed. The fires were put out. The snow melted. The people emerged. Daenerys buried Rhaegal beneath the Red Keep, now a shattered ruin. She didn't speak for days. But when she did, she said only one thing. No more thrones. No more kings. Sansa was crowned Warden of the South, not Queen. No crown, no throne, just duty. Arya sailed west, where no fire or ice could reach her. Brienne built a statue of Jaime, not in gold, but in stone solid, unshining, honest. And Tywin's name was never spoken again. The Game of Thrones had ended, not in glory, not in victory, but in survival. And in the north, as spring finally broke through the snow, a whisper passed through the trees. Winter came, and it was beaten by the last of the living.